10 May 1945. Munich. In a school ledger scavenged from a burned classroom, Carl M. 35, a bookkeeper, writes, "The war is still here, in our cupboards and in our mouths, and we live because we do not ask what we did." The sentence is dangerous. It cannot be spoken safely in a room with strangers. It cannot be said loudly on a tram. It cannot be said loudly on a tram. It cannot be told to the American soldiers now standing at the corner with their jeeps and their German interpreters. It belongs on a page that can be hidden under loose floorboards and read only at night. The city is shattered. The air smells of coal dust and wet plaster. Walls are shorn like pages torn out of a book. Streets run like arteries through ruins. It is called a Trümmerlandschaft now, a landscape of rubble. There is the arithmetic of ruins. It looks like this. In central Munich, more than half the buildings are damaged or destroyed. In Cologne, more than 90% of the inner city is gone. In Hamburg, whole districts are flattened. In Berlin, Hitler's capital, from one end to the other, 28 square kilometers of rubble mounds and improvised paths. The numbers do not breathe. The people do. They climb, they lift, they drag. On 17 May, a week after he writes the sentence, Karl walks to the Königsplatz. He passes groups of women with scarves knotted over their hair. They carry bricks in their arms like children. They are called Trümmerfrauen, rubble women. They stack cleaned bricks on wooden pallets. They pass them down lines of gloved hands. They work because someone must. They work because the city has to be made livable. They work because the men are dead or missing or in camps. A woman named Ursula is 19. Her diary survives in a city archive in a box labeled with a torn index card and a date. "Today," she writes on 20 May 1945, "we were 10 in our line and the foreman said we counted as 3 men. We laughed at him and worked until our arms were rubber. I went home with a pocket of nails and 2 good bricks. The kitchen needs a wall." Stadarchiv München, Tagebuch UH, May 1945. There is the mathematics of absence. 14 million German soldiers served in the Second World War. 5 million did not come back. 2 million are missing as of May 1945. Families post notices on the surviving walls of churches. Hans, last letter, March 1945 near Kustrin. Fritz, taken prisoner in Italy. Father seen at Stettin Station, February. Please write home. There are only rumors that ride on trains. Allied troops enter the city on 30 April. They post curfews. They seal off depots. They station guards at factories and radio stations. They set up kitchens. They put up signs that say off limits. They put up signs that say, "This building is requisitioned by the US Army." The Office of Military Government, United States, Bavarian Detachment, opens its headquarters and files daily occupation reports. The reports note that food deliveries are uneven, that the water system is fragile, that the electrical grid fails during storms, that the German police are insufficient, unarmed, watched. On 2 June, the military government announces that all pistols and rifles must be surrendered. The deadline passes. Knocks on doors begin. In some apartments, guns lie loose on top of wardrobes like photographs someone does not have the courage to tear up. In others, weapons are wrapped in newspaper and buried in gardens next to currant bushes. The fear is not hypothetical. The fear remembers 1918. The fear remembers street fighting. The fear knows that resentments survive bombings and that a man can become dangerous again. Karl lines up at a ration office on 13 June. He is a number in a file. He is a form in a cabinet. He is an entry in an OMGBY weekly report. Munich rationing proceeding with difficulty. Population agitated by rumors of shortages. Black market activity increasing. Bread is 200 grams per person per day. Fat is grams measured in shadows. Meat is measured in shadows of shadows. There is an arithmetic of hunger. It is relentless. When a ration returns, it does not fill what it finds. Winter comes early in 1945. It is not the hunger winter yet. That name belongs more strictly to 1946-47, when coal runs short and canals freeze and potatoes rot in mud. But hunger begins now. In his ledger, Carl writes, bread 200 grams, turnips, coffees, cigarettes are money. He has a sister in the countryside, in Erding, who can send potatoes sometimes. He has neighbors who trade. He has a jacket that can be turned into 2 shirts, that can be turned into 10 eggs, that can be turned into a small piece of meat if he is lucky. There is the arithmetic of exchange. Cigarettes are currency, not Reichsmarks. Certainly not the old Reichsmarks, certainly not the old Reichspemig printed with an eagle that many cannot bear to look at. A pack of Lucky Strike, 1 American pack, is worth a week of bread, or a glass of schnapps, or the quick repair of a bicycle tire. In a barracks yard in September 1945, a young American private says to an interpreter, "These people've got 1,000,000 marks, but no cigarettes." The interpreter answers, "In this city, you can light a stove with banknotes. The banknotes are not warm. Some come to the markets with bundles of cloth and leave with a pound of lard. Others come with rings. They leave with flour. The police walk through the crowds and pretend not to see. They cannot stop it. They cannot feed the city either. The Allied occupation reports note the trend. Black market so widespread that suppression impracticable," reads an O.M. Gus summary dated 14 September 1946. A cigarette is worth something because it is not printed by a German bank. It is worth something because it is not a memory. There is also the mathematics of shame. It does not appear in a ledger. It does not have a neat column. It is felt when a knock at the door brings a uniform. Not a German uniform. Sometimes a brown uniform, sometimes a green one, sometimes a man with a clipboard. A form is handed over. It is called a Fragebogen, a questionnaire. It asks about party membership. It asks about what you did. It asks about what you say you did. It asks for names and dates and the names of those who would speak for you. In the American zone between 1945 and 1949, 13 million of these forms circulate. People fill them out by candlelight. People ask neighbors what to write. People seek Perselschein, whitewashing certificates, signed by pastors and doctors and men with credentials. There are Spruchkammer tribunals that process the answers. There are categories. They are printed without emotive words. They are Hauptschuldig, major offenders, Belastit offenders, Minder Belastit, offenders, Minder Belastit, lesser offenders, Mitlaufer, followers, Entlastit, exonerated. Carl fills his on 12 October 1945. He writes that he joined no party. He writes that he worked as a bookkeeper. He writes that he knew very little. He writes that he was a soldier in 1940 and sent home in 1942 after an illness. He writes that he received the Iron Cross Second Class for faithful service. He writes that, like many, I listened to the radio but avoided political gatherings after 1934. He writes sentences that he believes he can defend. He writes sentences that leave holes for others to fill. The Spruchkammer summons him on 14 March 1947. The office is in a building that used to house a district administration, with chalk-white corridors and a staircase polished by shoes. "We are not a court," says a clerk to a woman waiting in the hallway with a sheaf of certificates in her lap. "But we will make decisions." A man goes in before him and comes out pale. He clutches a paper labeled Minder Belasteta, lesser offender. He says nothing. He says nothing. He folds the paper and walks down the stairs as if they might disappear. The mathematics of guilt begins with forms and ends with files stored on shelves. Between those poles are human bargains and phrases learned in millions of mouths. I only followed orders. I was only a teacher. I was the janitor. I was afraid. We had no choice. In Carl's case, there is a letter from a former supervisor who writes that Herr M.M. was conscientious in his accounting duties and did not participate in party work. There is a note in the denazification file that he attended a rally in 1937. There is a neighbor's affidavit that he kept to himself and was not a Nazi. The Spruchkammer classifies him as a Mitläufer, a follower. A small fine is levied. A brief work restriction is suggested. He goes home and tells his sister. She nods. The system needs stability. This is the cold knowledge shared by those who write in the Allied intelligence summaries and those who whisper in German kitchens. It is not possible to exclude everyone who joined. It is not possible to feed a city and rebuild a city with empty desks and idle workbenches. The files move. The decisions soften. By 1948, amnesty laws in the American zone reduce penalties for many. The Federal Republic, when it emerges in 1949, will pass the 31er Gesetz in 1951, reinstating many former Nazi civil servants to their posts. There is a logic. There are numbers. They yield a shape. The arithmetic of removal is older than any of this and younger too, because it happens now. Germans arrive in Munich from Silesia, from East Prussia, from Pomerania, from the Sudetenland. They come on foot, in cattle cars, in wagons pulled by horses more bone than animal. They are expelled by Czech police. They are thrown out by Polish committees replenishing towns with new names. Breslau becomes Rochow. Königsberg becomes Kaliningrad. They carry certificates issued after a search and a confiscation. They carry children. They carry papers that show they have the right to nothing. A woman named Hildegard, 32, leaves Glogau in January 1946 with 2 children and a trunk. Her husband is missing at Stalingrad since 1943. She arrives in Bavaria in March. She is assigned a room in an apartment on the 3rd floor of Lindwurmstraße 58, where a widow has 1 son and a kitchen. The police deliver a notice. In execution of the ordinance regarding the allocation of living space, Frau W. is directed to accommodate Frau H. Were and 2 minor children, effective immediately. There is no argument. The widow stands in her doorway. She looks at Hildegard's trunk and then at the children. She walks back into the kitchen and takes down 2 chipped cups from a shelf. The mathematics of rooms is merciless. A room is 12 square meters and it holds 3, or it holds 5, or it holds 7. By summer 1946 in Altstadt, there are streets where every room holds more than 4 people. The washing line is an hour measured in elbows. The stove is a schedule. The toilet is a negotiation. In this arithmetic, there are winners and losers, but the margins are too slender for the winners to feel victorious. The insults exchanged have memories in them that reach back to villages on the Oder and forward to cities on the Isar. On market days, the expellees sometimes stand apart. They speak different dialects. They say Kartoffel differently. They wear shawls that look like the East. They are not us, a woman tells an American civil affairs officer in a village near Augsburg in a report dated 19 September 1946. They are not from here. The officer writes, local resentment toward refugees noted, housing pressure acute, recommendations to increase requisition of unoccupied dwellings. The windows to those dwellings shut when footsteps echo in the stairwell. Near Starnberg, south of Munich, a displaced persons camp opens in the former Hitler Youth School at Feldafing. Its residents are not German, or if they are, It is, in a way, the Germans do not recognize. Many are Jewish survivors from Poland, Lithuania, Hungary. They are skeletons who walk with discipline. They sing in Hebrew at night in barracks lit by a single bulb. They hang curtains. They distribute UNICEF milk to their children. They form committees. They issue their own camp currency. Their documents are in English and Yiddish and Polish and German, and they are stamped UNRO or later IRO. They go to the lake sometimes and say that the water does not care about them. Germans pass the fence and do not look in, or they look quickly and then turn away. An American intelligence summary in July 1945 notes, attitudes toward former victims, Jews, foreign laborers, are mixed. Few expressions of guilt. A majority express desire to forget past and move on. The films are called Todesmälen, Mills of Death. People sit with their hands in their laps. Some cry. Some look at their shoes. Some stare at the screen as if it were a window and ask what room lies behind it. In March 1946, a group of German men is led by US soldiers to Dachau. The gates are open. The camp is empty of prisoners but full of ghosts. The men do not speak. The soldiers say nothing. They walk through a barracks and come out blinking in the sunlight. "We didn't know," says one man, an engineer. "We didn't know," says another, a former party member. The phrase becomes a plank stretched over an abyss. Some walk across it. Some fall without thinking, in dreams later, into the space beneath. Karl walks past a DP camp on a tram one day in September 1946 and writes in his ledger, "Faces like ours, but older. Children who have no German words for some things. A woman asked me to buy bread with cigarettes. I said I could not." He is honest with his ledger because the ledger will not say his name out loud. The winter of 1946-47 is cold. It is called the Hunger Winter. Frozen canals, frozen railway points, coal in short supply. People sleep with coats on. People cut wood from the edges of the English Garden and the Isar banks until policemen whistle and shake their heads. The rations drop to around 1,000 calories per day for many. There are long queues at soup kitchens. There is sawdust in bread and turnips in everything. The mathematics of hunger becomes exact in ribs and in cheeks, and in the heaviness of a man who cannot lift a brick on the third day of work. An oral history recorded in 1973 catches the voice of a woman who was a girl in that winter. "I remember the blue fingers," she says. "I remember my mother cutting potato peels thin and frying them. I remember the smell like candles. I remember my father stopped reading the paper because it made his stomach ache to see the words on food." Institut für Zeitgeschichte, interview, SH, 1973. And yet. And then. In 1947, something shifts in American policy. The cables change. The memos acquire a new tone. JCS Tone 67. The directive that ordered military government to treat Germany harshly and avoid steps toward economic recovery is replaced by JCS 779. The Marshall Plan, proposed in June 1947, includes Western Germany. "At present," says a Joint Army-Navy report, "the rehabilitation of German industry is indispensable for the European recovery. On docks, crates begin to arrive marked with stenciled letters, USA. They contain dried milk. They contain machinery. They contain wheat. They contain hope and a price, to be paid in alignment not with guns but with laws." The currency reform comes on 20 June 1948. It is surgical. It is unexpected in its suddenness. The old Reichsmark dies at midnight. It is exchangeable at a harsh rate. The new Deutsche Mark appears in packets delivered to distribution points under guard. Each adult receives 40 DM, then 20 DM more later. The effect is immediate. In Carl's notebook, the entry reads, 21 June. Shops have apples. Shops have shoes. Black market stalls are empty or trembling. A week later, he writes, yesterday I bought a magazine. It had advertisements for refrigerators. I do not know anyone with a refrigerator. I read the ad twice. The arithmetic of money is moral. When prices rise, when banknotes change, when wages are paid on time, the rhythm of the day alters and the shape of hope solidifies. Ludwig Erhard, a man with thick-rimmed glasses who will be called, later, the father of the economic miracle, stands behind the reform and removes price controls. Do not be afraid of freedom, he says in a radio broadcast. Some are afraid. Some are exhilarated. Many are too tired to lift their reaction above their ration cards. Factories reopen. Some are new. Some are old with roofs patched. There is steel from the Ruhr. There is glass from Bavaria. There are new machines from imported parts. There is a car with a shape like a beetle. There is a typewriter that fits on a desk. There is a camera that photographically records the new reality and the old wounds. The Marshall Plan posters are printed with a fist of wheat and the slogan, Mehr produzieren für mehr Verteilung, produce more for more distribution. The posters are optimistic in a way that many can borrow like a coat. Carl takes a job in a rebuilt factory in 1949. It is a small machine shop in Giesing that made bearings for aircraft, and now makes bearings for bicycles and printing presses. He runs accounts. He sits at a desk repaired with 3 kinds of wood and writes figures with a pencil worn short. The factory has a new manager. The manager has a file. The file is, thinly, a history. It contains a denazification certificate, a letter of reference from the French zone where his in-laws live, and an internal memorandum noting his good conduct. It is a file that will be expected of everyone in some form. The mathematics of work is steady. Shift times, wages, lunch breaks, piecework. Carl calculates wages and writes to the bank when a supplier is late. He notes the cost of electricity in March and compares it to January. He notes that steel is more expensive because of demand from the Rhine. He writes, we build machines. The city rebuilds. We agree not to talk about certain things. There is a bargain in the office. We agree to remember bombings and forget certain other things, or we choose carefully when to remember them. He writes that phrase and underlines it. It is the echo of his first sentence, but relocated to a pay ledger. Elections come. The SPD and the CDU and the CSU and small parties. The posters are everywhere. One shows a mother with 2 children and promises security. Another shows a hammer and promises work. The Cold War is becoming dense around them. There is a blockade in Berlin in 1948. Planes fly overhead with sacks of flour. People stand on roofs and wave. The airlift becomes a symbol. There is a divide now that is not only a line on a map, but a logic. East is Socialist Unity Party and planned economy and new slogans on walls where old ones have been painted over. West is the Basic Law, the Grundgesetz, signed on 23 May 1949, with promises of dignity and courts and articles for every possibility. There is a feeling that the new democracy rests on unspoken bargains, that the choice between remembering and forgetting is not personal only. It is structural. It is present in the schoolbooks. It is present in the ceremonies. In 1950, Carl's nephew, aged 12, brings home a history text. The chapter on the recent past is thin. It speaks of the Nazi time as if it were weather. It speaks of bombings at length and of hardships. It speaks of expulsions and the sacrifices of mothers in the rubble. It has a paragraph on Jews. It uses the passive voice. It is not a lie. It is an avoidance. The difference is important to note. A teacher stands before a class and says, with a flat voice, "We will not discuss what your fathers did. We will discuss what we must do now." The children nod. They do not know how to nod otherwise. There are years when no one says Auschwitz aloud in an ordinary house. There are years when a man who was once a block leader sits behind a glass window at the city hall and stamps forms. There are years when the word past is another word for awkward. The Bundesarchiv receives crates of denazification files. It labels them with letters and numbers. It stores them on shelves. It marks access restrictions. Historians come later and open those boxes. They find letters like Karl's supervisor's letter. They find routines turned into life and death. They find a bureaucracy that calculates guilt in increments of affiliation and attendance. They find a system that could not hold every man to the flames and decided, with icy logic, to warm everyone a little instead. The DP camps empty gradually. Some go to Israel, some go to America, some go to Canada. Some marry in barracks and take photographs without smiling because the muscles do not know how to arrange themselves. A few stay. They open small shops. They sell cloth and coffee and props for a future. Their German is crooked in 1949 and clean in 1949 and clean in 1955. They keep their papers in a box with foreign stamps. They sometimes avoid the old city squares because they look like cards from a deck that ruined their lives. In a notebook, an occupation official notes in 1949, public opinion in the American zone increasingly sees Germans primarily as victims of war, bombings, expulsions. Responsibility for crimes remains externalized to Hitler and his circle. Denazification, fatigue widespread, priority on reconstruction and anti-communism. The line is clinical. It is accurate. It is a scalpel that dissects a national mood without killing it. There are moments of confrontation. They are sharp, then dull, then sharp again. The Einsatzgruppen trial in 1958 brings testimonies of massacres in fields far away into courtrooms with microphones and wood-paneled walls. Newspapers print them on page 3. Eichmann is captured in 1960 in Argentina, tried in Jerusalem in 1961, and his words are translated and printed in German type. The Frankfurt Auschwitz trials begin in 1963. Men stand in the dock and say, "I did my duty." Survivors stand and say, "I saw you." Truth is said. Denial is said. The children in the 1960s asked their parents what they did. Not all questions are answered. Not all answers are believed. The mathematics of guilt continues, unreconciled. We return to the years before that because the story moves chronologically and thematically together like two threads braided. We return to 1949, to a small apartment where Karl keeps his ledger. We return to a Sunday in October when he visits the ruins of the Wittelsbacher Palais, once party headquarters, now a shell. He stands where the grand staircase was and looks at a sprout of grass pushing through ash. He writes, "Grass remembers nothing, but it grows all the same." He folds the page and goes home and puts a pot on the stove. In the 1950s, there are new things in windows. A radio with a tuning eye, a sewing machine and a catalogue. Coffee not made with acorns. The word Wirtschaftswunder appears in newspapers and then in conversations. The miracle is not a miracle. It is steel and sweat and hours and imported capital and the willingness to work all week and go to the lake on Sunday, tired and satisfied. It is also the willingness to sit at a family table and say, "We will not talk about 1938 and not talk about 1938. It is also the decision to talk about 1938. It is also the decision to talk about what we suffered, because suffering feels more like redemption than guilt does. A program on Bavarian radio in 1955 marks the 10th anniversary of the end of the war. There are voices of women who speak of carrying bricks and of porridge made from powdered milk. There is a man who speaks of walking home from a camp in Russia, villages away from the Urals. There is less of the other kind of voice. This is not an accusation. It is an observation. The mathematics of public memory counts that which is easiest to count: bombed houses, hours of work, lists of the missing. It has only begun to try to count the other things. In 1952, a memorial is unveiled in Munich to the victims of air raids. Later, a plaque is added to another spot that mentions the deportation of Jews. The plaque is small. The memorial is large. The difference between sizes contains a truth larger than either. In the schools, the chapter on the Nazi time thickens slowly. It remains safe for a while. It will not remain safe forever. Karl stays at his desk through the 1950s. He is an employee who keeps the company's books and holds its secrets. He balances ledgers. He offers advice to apprentices. He remembers numbers better than faces sometimes. He is married in 1951 to a woman from Alack whose brother was killed in Italy. He has a son who likes to draw machines. He has a drawer at work where he keeps a small penknife, a pencil sharpener, and a folder of old receipts. He has another drawer at home where he keeps the ledger from 1945, folded and held together with string. He watches colleagues come back to posts they left in 1945. The man who runs purchasing was once a party member. He says he was never cruel. The woman in personnel was never political. She was efficient. She is efficient now. There is a district official who returns to his office with a pension secured by law. He stamps forms and signs letters with a hand that used to sign other things. People shake his hand because he is useful to know. They do not say, "you." They say, "sir." The arithmetic of return is written in the 1951 law that reinstates civil servants who were dismissed after the war. It is written in the loosened rules around denazification. It is written in ministries filled with men with old networks. It is written in the faces of younger men who want jobs and shake hands and swallow their doubts because swallowing keeps their families fed. It is not a conspiracy. It is a system in which a democracy recruits from a population that has been what it has been and cannot be replaced by angels. There are numbers that show the shift. By 1951, the majority of those processed in denazification are classified as Mitläufer or Entlastet. A tiny fraction, less than 1%, carry the label Hauptschuldige. Many of those leave prison early. Reasons are practical and political. The prisons are crowded. The Cold War is urgent. Expertise is needed. The mathematics of guilt gives way to the logistics of the future. It is a calculation that feels cold and may not be wrong. Karl never says, "we were victims." He does not say, "we were guilty." He says in his notebook, "we were hungry and we were quiet." He says, "Later, we spoke of rations and of roofs and not of others dead." He writes on 3rd August 1956, "Our new democracy is a ledger. Debits and credits. Our new democracy is a ledger. Debits and credits." It works because most entries are small and no one wants to open a line marked irredeemable. The price of a steady line is to look away from the deficit some days. He reads the newspaper. He reads that Adenauer, the Chancellor, will sign a treaty with Israel in 1952 to pay reparations. He reads letters to the editor that rage against it. He reads others that approve. He reads about the Ulm trial and looks up the locations of killings on a map in an atlas. He reads in 1961 about Eichmann. He reads about the Frankfurt trials. He closes the paper. He opens his ledger. Outside of his notebooks, there are other voices. A refugee from Silesia writes in 1948, "We lost our home. They say we were to blame for what happened there. I was a girl in 1939. Now I am a mother. I do not know what to say to my children except that no one should be forced from their beds." Bundesarchiv, N 1542-211, Brief KZ, 1942. A Jewish survivor in Feldafing writes in 1948. A Jewish survivor in Feldafing writes in 1947. "Sometimes one woman brings us apples, and it is so strange to take food from a German hand." YIVO Archives, DP Collection, Letter LK, 1947. An Allied intelligence officer writes in 1946, "The Germans display qualities of industry and resignation that suggest rapid recovery. The moral dimension remains unaddressed in most public discourse." UOMGEEE. Weekly Intelligence Report, 12 December 1946. The gold of men who made speeches under swastikas now speak of Europe. Women who cleaned bricks now run households with washing machines. Children who drew tanks now draw cars. Teenagers listen to American music on radios with glowing tubes. The city looks forward. The city is proud of itself for looking forward. Sometimes pride is justified. In 1959, Karl attends a ceremony in a rebuilt square where the mayor speaks of peace and partnership with France. He applauds. He is sincere. He stands afterward near a wall where a small plaque commemorates deportations. He reads the names carved into the stone. He recognizes one. A watchmaker on the corner, a quiet man who repaired his father's pocket watch in 1937. He goes home and opens the drawer and looks at the watch, which he still has. It ticks unevenly, as if unwilling to tell time precisely in a house where so much time has been wasted in silence. In 1968, he listens to students on the radio chanting in Frankfurt and Berlin. They speak of fascism in the institutions. He is uneasy and also feels a flicker of agreement. He writes, "We will always prefer order to interrogation. They think interrogation can be order. Perhaps they will teach us to speak more honestly. Perhaps they will exhaust us with demands we cannot meet." The ledger of politics has a column for cynicism and a column for hope. He writes numbers in both. The Cold War is constant. It shapes everything and excuses much. It provides jobs in arms factories and arguments in parliaments. It provides a focus for fear that is safer than the past. It lets men who should not sit adjacent to law speak loudly about liberty and thereby claim it for themselves. It makes the arithmetic of alliance clear. If you are West, you are part of a system that brings prosperity and courts. If you are East, you are part of a system that brings certainty and shortages and a different kind of silence. In both, the past is a tool or a forbidden room. In both, the children are learning how to speak to their parents. A schoolbook is revised in 1964. Karl's son, now in his late teens, brings it home. The chapter on the Nazi period is longer. It includes a page on the Nuremberg laws. It includes a photograph of a synagogue on fire with men standing and watching. It includes a page from Anne Frank's diary. It includes questions at the end of the chapter that are not easily answered with dates. It is better. It is still fragile. The weight of everything cannot be put between paper covers without the spine breaking. But the attempt matters. It is easy to tell the story of a miracle and to forget the rooms in which people chose not to speak. It is simple to tell the story of guilt and to forget the dead who would have preferred that those still living would live well. The moral arithmetic is not a ledger. But the ledger helps to understand how people lived. Karl grows older. His hair thins. His son marries a teacher. His wife dies in 1970. He keeps going to the factory until he retires. He keeps the ledger in the drawer. He returns to the early pages sometimes and is surprised by how his own handwriting looks like someone else's. He wonders whether the sentence he wrote on 10 May 1945 still helps. He wonders whether he has lived a decent life with a core of silence. One evening in 1972, he attends a lecture at the Volkshochschule, a community college, on memory and reconstruction. The speaker quotes from Allied reports and from German diaries. The speaker shows slides of the city in 1945 and of the city now. The speaker asks, without accusing, "What have we chosen to remember?" The room is quiet. People look at their hands. Old habits are strong. New ones exist beside them like a younger plant in the same soil. Carl opens his notebook that night and writes, "We learned to live with silence. We learned to agree. We learned to agree. We learned to count and count again until the new sums balanced, even if we did not know where to put some figures." The war after the war was a market in which you barter memory for peace, and sometimes the rate is unfair, but the trade is made because people are tired. I am not proud of this sentence. I do not know if I can write another. He pauses. He writes, "A plaque on a wall speaks for those who cannot. A wage slip speaks for a family. A ledger records both." He thinks of Ursula, whom he never met, but whose diary he read in the archive one day when he had an hour to kill and walked into the building where documents are kept and asked for anything from May 1945. He thinks of Hildegard with her trunk and the widow with 2 cups. He thinks of the man who came back from Russia and the woman who gave apples through a fence. He thinks of his own answers on the Fragebogen and the Spruch in the Spruchkammer's name, the sentence that was not strictly a judgment but felt like one. He thinks of the arithmetic of food. He thinks of the arithmetic of guilt. He thinks of the arithmetic of rooms and of files and of the Cold War that divided a country and a family's conversation. He thinks of the arithmetic of forgetting, how it adds up to a house on a street with geraniums on a windowsill, and the arithmetic of remembering, how it adds up to a sentence on a page that no one sees. He decides to write one more sentence. 17. October 1972. We stayed alive by keeping books of wages, of ration points, of who had been where and when. And the front line after 1945 ran through my memory and my paperwork, not across a battlefield.